2. Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. I've been doing a lot of baseball talk around here, and I know it's football season, and we're all getting ready for Lamar Mania. This guy is in one of my favorite towns in America. Everyone knows how much I love Kansas City. I will hopefully be having some Jack Stack with him when I get out there the third week of September. He has been my friend for 27 years now, which is more than half of my life. He's a little older than me, so it's less on a percentage basis. But Jeff Montgomery has owned a sports radio station, been an operator, he's been a relief pitcher, he's been an all-star, and he's been my friend for a long, long time. And, you know, we're back into these weird places again, Monty, where for years and years you and I would get together and we'd want to talk about like a Kiss concert, which my wife and I are going to see Kiss tonight in Hershey. We're going to paint our faces in honor of you and Mark Gubiza. And sometimes we're talking about baseball, but the ALCS was like this blip thing we had a few years ago. Most of the time we're talking about 100 losses and rebuilding and not having money and being small market and all that stuff. And, man, on the doorstep here now in Baltimore, we're talking about the future of our franchise. And, man, I can't think of a better guy to talk to than a player who played in your era where you used to come in here when it was 3.6 million shut, right? Literally.
Yeah, it's really changed a lot. In fact, my wife's here in town with me for this series, and I told her, I said, I'm just shocked at, you know, the way things have changed for these two franchises since we're here in 2014. And, you know, we're averaging, gosh, probably a little over 10 or 12,000 a game. I think that's what the O's have in the stands the last couple of nights. The Royals have been here. So it's unfortunate, but to me, it's a little bit of kind of like the footprint of baseball right now. You got so many teams that are just trying to play for the future, and I don't know how good that is because, I mean, literally coming into the spring training, I felt like there are probably only about 5 teams that legitimately could be World Series contenders, and sure enough, that's playing out. There are no real big pleasant surprises. Maybe you look at the Twins and say they've been a pleasant surprise in the American League, but not a lot of teams have stepped forward. You know, I throw the Braves in that category too, who, you know, they had a good season last year as well, but you know, just not a lot of teams that come out of nowhere and say, hey, we're there, we're ready to compete, and we're ready to, you know, look forward to maybe having a title and a chance to do something very special for our city.
Well, you know, these rumors start with, you know, maybe the Orioles will be sold, maybe someone would want to keep him here, maybe someone would want to move them. What would Major League Baseball do? And yet, you know, we've got a dying owner and a franchise here that you have witnessed firsthand this week. How bad can it get? It can get this bad. You know, I thought, how bad could it get the day after Mike Flanagan committed suicide? And then they won for a couple of years miraculously. And yeah, Monty, I mean, you were part of the parade out there and a couple of years of magic, and you waited a long, long time in the powder blue George Brett jerseys waiting for, you know, to get that nectar, you know, for the tree to draw some sap as it did in 13, 14, 15, 16. Now you're on the other end of that curve, and I wonder this about your franchise as well. What's really been built here? You know what I mean? Like, you have these runs and you have these parades and whatnot, and then you come back and it's, well, unless you're winning 100 games, we're going to have 10,000 people at the ballpark. I really worry that baseball is not built itself like cement. You know what I mean? It hasn't built it strong, and I'm really worried about the leadership at every level from, you know, you being a former striking player and a players association guy back during, you know, the year when we didn't have a World Series to where we are now, which is, it feels like we're at Lords of the Realm, you know, 2020, and it feels like the players and the owners are going to go at it again over money, as always, and it really feels to me like there's really a lack of leadership at the top to not look at the game and say the game's not as good, it's not as interesting, it's white, it's old, it's slow, it's tilted with 5 teams, as you've said. Who's going to come in here and look out for the greater good of the game, to quote Bowie Kuhn, you know?
Yeah, that'll be very interesting because it's not going to fix itself overnight. I mean, the one good thing that they have going for them is that there's a ton of money in the sport. I mean, the revenues are enormous, so there's enough money and there's a big enough pie for everybody to be happy. But I think leading up to the next collective bargaining agreement, there's just a lot of posturing, a lot of, you know, whether it be the player side or the owner side saying, you know, we got to really kind of rework this system because it's not working for the players. I mean, my definition now of a free agent is unemployed, and I know that's not good for the players. The owners have done a really nice job in figuring things out. I think all the metrics have really been beneficial for, you know, for the teams to figure out, you know, here's what we can do for a guy, and we'll use your Manny Machado as an example from last year before he was traded. You know, you can predict what he's going to be for a long period of time, he's going to get an enormous deal because of his age. But if you take a guy who's normally, turning a free agent, around 30 or 31, 32 years old, there's not much of a market for those guys anymore. Whereas, the money's so big, the owners can't afford to be hamstrung with deals. I mean, Chris Davis here in this market's a great example. You can't just make that, that commitment to a guy if you don't get the production. And unfortunately, we've seen it happen too many times. And so there's a lot of things that need to be fixed. I mean, I think the game's in a really poor state with regards to the way that the game's played itself. I think like 45% of the runs scored in baseball now are via the home run. And sure, that's great when it happens. So how about the other 300 pitches you have to watch, during the course of a baseball game, and there's no action, there's no run scored. It's strike out or hit a home run. It's just the game's changed in a negative fashion. But again, it is our American pastime. It is a sport that's full of enormous financial resources. So there should be a way to fix it. But I'm just afraid that this next collective bargaining, it could be somewhat of an Armageddon.
What puts the brakes on the slide of the game itself as we all see it? I mean, you certainly see the game at a different level, having played it for so long and love it at a different level than I love it, certainly now, and you're still involved as a broadcaster and as an investor. I'm invested in sports. I bought a sports radio station here 22 years ago, so no one's more invested in me. When I hear Nashville Orioles or Austin Orioles or Portland Orioles, I look at Oakland, I look at Tampa and say they got bigger fish to fry, but I also look at this, Monty. You wrote a big check one day to buy an AM radio station like me. We might have been fools. Who's going to write that $1.2, $1.4 billion check for the Baltimore Orioles in a shrinking market now that the Washington Nationals are there and Angelos has squeezed the first 20 years of all the network money out of it? If the Orioles have to compete on a level playing field where they are, it goes back to why the NFL didn't want to expand here in the 90s. It's kind of a crowded little Fort Worth market stuffed between Philadelphia and Washington, and if someone smelled more money in Austin or Nashville that came along, who knows what baseball's leadership looks like 3 years, 5 years, 7 years from now, after what you've already called an Armageddon, where the money's going to come from once all the cable TV money's dried up and everybody's cut their cord on that. Figuring it out would take having people who care about your games. And when only 10,000 people are at Royals games and whatever handful's been out there this week here in Baltimore, you need to make people care. People have to love baseball in that Robert Redford natural way, the way you did when you were a kid and the way I did when I was a kid.
Yeah, and it really has to go back to the players. I mean, it's all about, the players are the sport. It's unfortunate we're talking about, ownership, we're talking about franchises, more than we're talking about players and seeing spectacular things happening on the playing field. And I think that's maybe a little bit what I was talking about a little bit ago is the fact that you just have lost a lot of interest in what's going on in the game just because it's hard to get to know a lot of the players because you don't see those things. I'll use Cal Ripken as an example. I mean, just think the focus was on Cal Ripken for so long based on what he did on the field. You don't have many stories like that anymore, and it's unfortunate the game's changed to where let's get in the batter's box, let's swing hard in case we can hit it. We hit a ball a long way, we make a lot of money. And just like my 8th grade history teacher told me, he said, every war that we've ever had in the United States has been because of money. Everything that's happened in our society, it's because of money. And it's the same with baseball. It's the same with the sports. It's because of money, whether it be the players or the owners, really kind of positioning themselves to get the biggest piece of the pie they can get. But it creates a distraction from the sport, and it creates a situation where not as many people are in love with the game, and not as many people are going out to the ballparks. They're saving their money. They're watching on TV now, and there are a lot of other ways to spend your money, and they have to find a way to be creative. And I do like some of the things they're doing. They're doing some things like I saw where they're going to play a game up in Dyersville, Iowa next year, the Field of Dreams. So where the Orioles are going to have the game next year in Williamsport before the Little League World Series. They're doing some fun things like that, I think, to create some interest. And the more of that stuff they can do, the better off they'll be. But at the end of the day, again, it goes back to it has to be a sport in which the players shine. And there's a lot of focus on the players. There's a lot of focus on the game. And we're not talking about, the free agency situation. We're not talking about, franchises moving. We're not talking about the negative things involved in sports or baseball particularly. we have to be talking about things going on the baseball field.
Jeff Montgomery's been my friend for going on 3 decades now. Invested in sports radio in Kansas City. Invested his right arm in Major League Baseball for a decade and a half, and throwing it for the Kansas City Royals. Pitched in the '93 All-Star Game here when the great Geddy Lee sang "Oh Canada" at Camden Yards. One of the we haven't had a whole lot of highlights of Camden. I mean, there's Cal Ripken, and then there was Geddy Lee and you at the '93 All-Star Game and Cito Gaston. For Kansas City and for you being the adoptive son there and being on television through the bad times, the good times, the great times, and now the times, what has baseball meant there over the last couple of years in the afterglow? I mean, I've said that the Orioles kind of wet the bed on the growth of their brand and the aftermath of being good for a couple of years, Buck Showalter ball here, and in your case, a parade. What could the Royals have done differently? I mean, what do you look back over the last 36 or 48 months and say, this is the reason we're 45 and 81 instead of the other way around, and how could it have been different? Because the clamoring was to spend money on Hosmer, spend money on Mustafa, all that stuff. A lot of that stuff didn't happen, but what's on the field right now is not happening either, and the afterglow, even in your community, isn't like the kind of blind loyalty, let's say, the Cardinals get in the other side of the state, right?
Yeah, and really kind of what happened was the team went 29 years without a postseason appearance. I'm not talking about a World Series championship. I'm talking about a postseason appearance. So 2014, they go to the postseason, go to the World Series, come up a game short. They go back to 15. They win a World Series. So it's 30 years between World Series championships, from 85 to 2015. And a lot of those players were at a stage in their career where, they were probably not going to be able to be signed by the Royals. A lot of people around baseball were saying the best thing the Royals could do would be unload the Moustakas and the Hosmers and the Canes and the Escobars, that core four of players that really helped them obtain back-to-back World Series opportunities and the World Championship. And Dayton Moore, our general manager, said, look, it's not fair to the fans, to kind of jerk the sheets on them and dismantle this club. We feel like we still have a very competitive team. Let's go for it in 16 and see what we can do. They came up short. They were actually in contention up till the 1st of September. I think, in fact, they were the wild card team on the 1st of September of 2016. They made a few trades. They give up some more guys in the farm system. And as a result, if you take those guys they traded, you take the guys they traded in 2015 to get the Johnny Cuetos and the Ben Zobrist, I mean, they really depleted their farm system. And the thing that Dayton Moore, the general manager, said, I can't do it to the fans. I got to keep trying to win. They've waited so long. So there's an enormous, they really grew their brand back to where it was back in the 80s when the team was very competitive, late 70s, early 80s. And unfortunately, they just came up short with regards to talent. And they weren't able to make the trade after these players were so close to free agency, and they hit a lull. They hit a spot where there was not the ability to replenish the players at the major league level with players from the farm system. So the result, they go into a rebuild mode, and that's the thing that our GM has said. He said the biggest mistake I made was allowing our system to get depleted, where we were at top of the mountain, and then suddenly we got to go down to the very bottom of the valley and try to start this thing over again. So when we get back to the top, and he didn't say if we get back to the top, he feels confident when the team gets back to the top, they're not going to allow that to happen again, where they allow themselves to be depleted to the point where they got to go back down in that deep valley again.
Yeah, much like Baltimore, Monty, you guys have football, baseball seasons there, and you also have college season, much more so than we have around here. But the football team really breathing some life into your community at a time when the baseball team is not there. We're certainly hoping for the same thing from Lamar Jackson, but you kind of have the most exciting player in the sport there, right?
Yeah, it has. I mean, it's amazing what Patrick Mahomes has done for the franchise, done for the city. He's a tremendous young man, tremendous spokesperson for not just for the Kansas City Chiefs, but for Kansas City in general. So,
because he's the son of a baseball player, right?
Absolutely. And in fact, his dad was one of my contemporaries and got a chance to know him during our playing career. So he comes from good stock, and he's a phenomenal athlete. He's a guy that kind of rises to the occasion. He's just he's a special talent, and credit to the Chiefs for doing what they did in order to put themselves in a position to draft Patrick Mahomes and make him part of their franchise. And everybody's hopeful he's going to be around for a while and be a special player.
Jeff Montgomery joining us here. Last thing, just thoughts on the Orioles in general and a rebuild and Astro Ball and Mike Elias and how much the game has changed from your eyes. The first time you started to see cameras being set up and arm angles and Buck Showalter never saw any of that around here, and we started hearing about it the last 2 or 3 years of everything's being done differently in the new age places, right? Well, now the Orioles have become this new age place. Baseball America and the people that monitor such things believe that the minor leagues have come a long way in 1 year. That's a wonderful thing to hear. But from your baseball eyes and where you are in watching this thing, would you have hope if you're an Orioles fan and what they're doing?
Well, looking at what they have in the minor leagues, yes, I would, because that's really where it's going to start. That's where it's a process that takes a while. I mean, it's not a 2 or 3 year process. It's more like a 5 to 8 year process, and nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear 5 years of going through what we're going through right now. But that's kind of what it takes, because once you get guys 2 or 3 years through the minor leagues, it's going to take them a year or two, or maybe 3 years at the big league level before they ever are that really kind of consistent, productive player that you need them to be. Very few guys come up and hit the ground running and never look back. I mean, it takes a few ups and downs, maybe get sent back to the minor leagues to work on some things. But yes, for everybody I've talked to and everything I've read, especially some of the young pitching in the system, I think, yes, there's hope. And I think at some point there's going to be more of a level playing field with regards to all the rules and how things work as far as the revenues are concerned. And it should help everybody have a chance to be more competitive. And every team, I don't care, how good you are, you're going to have years where you have to take a step back in order to move forward. But you just don't want to take a step back for a decade. Or for the Royals, they took a step back for 3 decades, and it was just horrendous to watch for so long. But yes, I think every team, if you're finishing at the bottom like the Royals and the Orioles have done the last couple of years, you're going to draft at the top. And those draft choices should give you the opportunity to become competitive and get back in the game, and hopefully it's sooner rather than later. But yeah, I think there's a good reason to be hopeful, and I can never imagine Major League Baseball without having a team from Baltimore in it.
Detroit Tigers going to be worse than the Orioles the rest of the way? They're certainly trying, aren't they?
Well, if you look at the Tigers, they don't have any pieces to their puzzle that are going to be there 5 years down the road. The Royals and the Orioles, in my opinion, both at least have a portion of their puzzle completed. In other words, you've got 3 or 4 players that are good, good fits for the long term, and I just don't see that for Detroit. They've been, whether it be due to injury or guys who have underperformed, they don't have anybody in their system right now at the big league level that you can say, hey, this guy is going to be the next so-and-so. This guy's going to be the next so-and-so. At least you see that with the 2 clubs we've been talking about with the Orioles and the Royals here today.
All right, well, we're playing for that number 1 draft pick around here, Monty. We got to have something. We play the Tigers for a couple games 2 weeks from now. I hope to see you in Kansas City. I hope we get some barbecue together. We're in for the Ravens-Chiefs game. We missed it last year, but won't miss it this year. Already got it circled on the calendar. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks for spending some time with us. Enjoy Baltimore, man.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Jeff Montgomery, my friend for many, many years. He and I have had a couple of lunches at Amici's back in the 90s, back when he was hurling it for the Royals, and always a forward thinker and always a great company, and been involved in the sports radio business, amongst other things, and broadcasting with the Kansas City Royals, and also big supporter of our Give a Spit when we came through Kansas City back in 2015. So love us some Jeff Montgomery. He spent a couple days here with the Orioles in town with the Royals visiting. Nasty at WNST.net. I'm out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We come in crystal clear. The morning newspaper ships and is getting made better and augmented with all sorts of cool Baltimore positive stuff. The audio vault. We're upgrading the morning newspaper. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness at planetfitness.com. Always $5 down and $10 a month. Baltimore Positive back after it with Ron Shapiro next week, Dick Cass next week. We're going to take a long, hard look at the sports situation around here, but of course the politics of it all. Rescheduling Ben Cardin. We've got Brandon Scott joining us, Bill Ferguson joining us, and Baltimore Positive episodes this week with David Hornbeck, legendary educator, along with Don Moeller. Find that at baltimorepositive.com. We're going to fix Baltimore. Don't you worry. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.